Hey guys, it's on TheJWittz, and I want to do a video on the math behind breeding in Generation 6 of Pokemon, which is Pokemon X and Y, or Z if they make it too. So for breeding, you're going to want the Pokemon that can breed with every Pokemon in the game that's not in an unidentified egg group, ditto, and you're going to want them to have good IVs. If you don't know exactly what IVs are, I would say go check out the Cerebi article on it. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'll put a link down in the description after I remember. If I don't, just remind me and I'll direct you to it with the new Google Plus comments that are so great. But what you're going to want is one with 231 IVs for this method. So first off, in Generation 5, the encounter rate of a Ditto was 15%, which 15% out of 100, and the encounter rate in a Friend Safari, there's only 3 Pokemon in Friend Safari, so it's a 33 1/3%. I just rounded it down to 33. So once you've encountered the Ditto out of your 33% chance in the Friend Safari, you have a 1 out of 6 chance to get the first stat you want because there's 6 stats and you want 1 stat, and then there's a 1 out of 5 because 1 stat is already taken away, so to get that. So it adds up to about 11 out of 1,000, which is alright stats, but taking out the encounter rate, once you encounter that Ditto, it's a 1 out of 30, so you only need to encounter 30 Dittos to get the combination you want, as opposed to the other generation where 15% is a really low encounter rate, so you're probably not going to get that lucky and encounter one, and then you have to get lucky twice with the 1 out of 32, which ends up being a 3 out of 20,480, and you'll see the percents right here, how monumentally easier it is in 6th generation to get a 231 IV Ditto. But that's not the main focus of this video. This video is showing you how easy and how you should really take a shot at breeding in 6th generation, how much easier Nintendo made it for you. Well, Game Freak, you know what I mean. So the setup you want is a Pokemon with the correct nature you want, holding an Everstone, because they'll keep their nature. All the Pokemon that are bred through them will keep their nature. Also, any egg moves you want that on your Pokemon, whether they be male or female, because egg moves now carry over from either if you're breeding with a Ditto. And then also you want your Ditto with your 2 IVs and the Destiny Knot. The Destiny Knot is a new item introduced that makes breeding so much easier because it takes 5 out of your 6 stats from either of your parents and gives it to your Pokemon. So you'll get a better explanation of that coming up. So let's just skip on to the next part. So when using the Destiny Knot, there's 6 different combinations of IVs that can be brought over, with 1 not being used every single time. As you can see here, when we're going for a Speed and a Special Attack 31 IV, position 1 and 4 would not allow us to get that. So that means position 2, 3, 5, and 6 all have uninterrupted Special Attack and Speed, so that's how we get that 4 out of 6 positions of Destiny, as I like to fancily call them. So if your Destiny is in the correct position, now you need the hope that your IVs come from the correct Pokemon. This is obviously a 50% chance because you have the 2 breeding parents to come from, and if they come from the Ditto, you will get the 31 IV, which ends up multiplying to a 1 out of 6 chance, so that's only 6 Pokemon, and that's most likely. Probability doesn't work like that. You don't always get 50% heads, 50% tails, but that multiplies out to about 16.67%, which is, that's a fairly good percent. That is a good betting percent to go on. This is opposed to in 5th generation, where you'd have a 1 out of 40 using the same probability. You want to have the Destiny Knot, you'd have one of the power items instead. So the increase of likelihood is about 556.3%, or 34 less eggs you'll have to hatch in 6th generation. Also with these Dittos, you're going to have to do this 3 times to get every single IV taken care of, even though you're only going to need 5 31 IVs on a Pokemon unless they are a mixed attacker, because you don't need both attack and special attack on a single Pokemon unless, as I said before, they are a mixed attacker. Now we move on to the second phase of breeding, where you're trying to get 4 31 IVs. Now you have a child from the last stage with the 2 31 IVs, and you also have a Ditto with 2 different 31 IVs for this next step. Now the probability of the positions of Destiny have decreased because now only 2 positions are interrupted. It still is pretty good odds, 1 out of 3, but it is a bit harder than the first stage of breeding. Now also, after getting the correct position of Destiny, you have to worry about 4 stats coming from the right parent, 2 coming from the child, and 2 coming from the new Ditto, which adds a bit more probability to it. But it's still not that difficult when you see it finally comes out to about 1 in 48, which is about 2.08%, which isn't a great percent. I don't really like this one, but it's still a pretty good probability and will only take you about 48 eggs when you think about it like that. This 48 eggs seem monumentally small when you compare it to the almost 3,000 it would have taken you in 5th generation with a 0.04% chance. The increase of likelihood between these 2% is 5,100%, or 2,634 less eggs between the two generations. Now we move on to the final step. I won't go over getting 6 IVs on a Pokemon because I think this already shows my point enough, and for most things you're only going to need 5 IVs. It's a very rare outlier that you're going to need 6. So now that you're focused on all 5 IVs, there is only one Position of Destiny, which is still 1 out of 6 chance, which really isn't that bad compared to 5th generation to get your 5 IVs that you want. So as we've been through before, you need the IVs that come from the correct parent, but if you have a Ditto that has overlapping IVs, say it has a special attack and an HP, it'll take off one of these and decrease the probability significantly. It's okay if you don't have it, you still have a pretty decent probability coming out to 1 in 192 eggs that you'll get the Ditto you want. But if you do have an overlapping Ditto, or you just want to take the time to make it a little bit easier and go catch them more in the Friend Safari, I would say that is a lot better method and will decrease your probability significantly. This probability also translates to a 0.52%, which is still less than the second phase in 5th generation, which just speaks bounds about how much easier breeding became in this generation. Just when you thought the boundary couldn't get any bigger, it's a 1 out of 18,747 chance that using the same method you will get a 5 IV Pokemon in Generation 5, which translate to the big old 9,711.32, I think I read that number wrong, percent, which is 18,555 eggs difference, which that's so much of your time that you'd be wasting trying to do this in 5th generation. That's why when I competitive battled in 5th generation, I strayed away from doing this, because it's just way too much time and effort in 5th generation. But now in 6th generation, it's feasible for even casual players who just want a really good Pokemon to stomp through the battle mansion with. So the total eggs adds up to 246 eggs only needed in 6th generation, compared to the whopping over 20,000 eggs needed in 5th. So if you're into competitive battling and you want that tiny bit of edge, or you just want to be on the same level as everyone else who IV breeds, it is definitely a good time choice for you, and it really doesn't take that long. You can just do it while watching TV or something else, or use the good old dime trick where you stick it under the controller and you just let them ride around Lumio City. It's really not that bad, and it's also a lot easier than the 20,000 more eggs you'd have to be doing it in Generation 5. So as you can see by these numbers, it is very lopsided, the Generation 6, about how much better it is. So I thought, just to make a good comparison to see how much it really has improved, we'll use the best method, which actually the Pokemon to breed is harder to get, but I'm not going to go into in-depth details, which adds up to about 1,639 eggs, but to get those Pokemon to breed is so much more difficult. But even with that increase between Generation 6 and Generation 5 is still huge. So even with the best possible method in Generation 5, it's still over 1,000 eggs shorter than do it in Generation 6, which just shows leaps and bounds about how much easier it is. So my general thesis for this is, and other than like entertaining you with the math, because I kind of enjoyed figuring this out and seeing how much easier and seeing the probabilities, all that stuff. Maybe that's just because I'm a nerd, but my general thesis of this is, if you're going to do competitive battle, go for those 5 IVs. It's really not that difficult, and it may give you that little edge, or at least put you on the same battlefield as someone else who wants to try the IV breed. So I've been Sabes Untitled, and I hope you enjoyed my look at the math behind the breeding in Generation 6 and how much easier it has become. If you enjoyed, I would really appreciate a like, favorite, or maybe a subscribe. That just sounds really stupid. Just don't subscribe anymore. So I hope I could entertain you and just maybe make you think about stuff, and maybe I don't know, go play some Pokemon, stop listening to my annoying self. I've been Sabes Untitled, and I'll see you hopefully next time.